So, my name is Christian Reich, and I'm going to be one of the three of us who are going to give the tutorial. Frank DeFalco, George Rybchuk are the teachers. We're going to, while we're doing it, one of us is going to talk, the others are going to walk around and help you while you're playing on your machine in the box. If you have a computer that's not using a United States keyboard, okay, then you have to go through these steps. So once you're in the, but you're not in there yet, right? So once you're in it, you have to go through preferences, iBus preferences, go through this, add the keyboard you need. I'm going to send you, if you're not ready, that's fine, we're going to do it in the break. And then add a Korean keyboard, or the Chinese, or whatever it is, Korean. Okay? And then click on when you're in it. So everybody please open the VM if you can. If not, we're going to fix it in the break. Don't worry about it anymore. If you're at this screen here, okay, click on adjust window size, and then you can make it as big or small as you want. Otherwise, it always gives you like the 600 times 800. And if you time out, which you will, the password is Odyssey. The username is Odyssey, the password is Odyssey, except you can't see it when you do this. And then you're good. Then you're good.
What was the preferences thing you wanted us to do? I think that's for international.
If you need a keyboard, because the keyboard is going to be US, and then people are going to be frustrated. And then so the first part of the tutorial, we're going to do everything hands-on in SQL. So you're going to have to open one of the two applications that are here, which is this little elephant, which is a PG admin. So if you double-click that one, you don't have to do this. Double-click on Odyssey or say Connect. So a few words about OMOP and Odyssey. Okay, who thinks who knows the history of OMOP and why it's called OMOP and why it's called Odyssey and what was going on? Don, you know this, so raise your arm. Okay, yeah, that's what often happens. People actually don't know this, which is not an accusation at all. So here's what happened. The FDA in the 2000s got a lot more aggressive on marketed drug products that were on the market that got in trouble. Okay, we had some effect that got them in trouble, and the FDA pulled the drug off of the market. So over decades, it was about 10-ish per year. Okay, and then it absolutely started spiking. Okay, the biggest one of these is the Vioxx scandal, where, if you remember, 2005-ish, this very effective painkiller for arthritis patients was found to cause cardiovascular issues and heart attack. And it was a huge scandal because, of course, Merck was accused of knowing this and not telling anybody not to hurt their sales. And what happened is there was a congressional hearing, and the FDA had to come to the congressional hearing, and they were asked, why does that happen? Don't you check the drugs? And then the FDA said, well, we have clinical trials, and they are too short and they are too small to see all the effects, particularly the ones which take time and where there's a big background. Heart attack is something that people get without taking the drug a lot as well. And so then they said, okay, so where we fix it? And then saying the only way to see those is in the observational data. Okay, and so Congress changed the law and told them that by 2012 they have to have 100,000 people, Americans, available for such surveillance, drug surveillance, and they have to build a national drug surveillance program, or as they call it, post-market risk identification and analysis system. That thing exists now. It's called Sentinel, and but then it didn't exist, and the pharmaceutical industry got very scared because they thought, oh God, now they're going to go in and pluck out one drug after the other, and this is not good for us. So and the other thing is, while clinical trials are very well established, how you do them, how you run them, how you analyze them. There are regulations. There's the whole cottage industry helping you how to do this. For the observational research, it's not. There was no standardized know-how. How do I find an effect of a drug and can be sure that I found it and can be sure that there isn't anything, which is actually more important to these companies. And so they came to the FDA and said, let's do a little project where we establish how to do this, how to do post-market drug surveillance for safety issues. And it's like 17 pharma companies, they all pitched in money, and the FDA pitched in people, scientific support staff to help with this. And OMOP was born, which stands for Observational Medical Outcomes Partnership. And only a committee of lots of people can come up with a name like this. Nobody knows what it actually stands for anymore. Everyone only knows the word OMOP, but it actually meant Observational Medical Outcomes Partnership because it's a partnership between pharma and the FDA. And the plan was to figure out, to establish this know-how. Which databases, which methods, how to govern this, because the pharmaceutical industry doesn't have observational data. And that would then inform the national drug surveillance system. Okay? So OMOP started, and a lot of conversation started to debate on what's the right way to do this. And so then Paul and Patrick and those guys said, why don't we make an experiment? And it was before I was there. And why don't we make an experiment and find out what works and what doesn't work? Because there were a lot of debate, there's claims data, there's EMR data, which of the various methods and designs, in which situations, the debate is still going on, by the way. But why don't we make an experiment? We take a bunch of databases, okay, and a bunch of methods, and check against positive and negative controls. If you were yesterday in the session, then you've heard this many times, that this has to be done. Positive control means there is a nasty effect, is red. ACE inhibitors cause angioedema. Blue means there's no effect. Okay? Which methods run against which databases will find those controls and figure them out correctly. And that would be the winner, and then everybody should use that particular method and that particular database. Okay? So that experiment was done, and a library of methods was built. So now what you saw yesterday is much more advanced already. The principle is the same idea, and they still exist. And in order to do this, you had to take all these databases, and so you have 10 databases, 14 methods, and if you do the conventional way, then every method will have to be tweaked for every database, which is 10 times 14, and that is a nightmare, and you never know whether the difference is because of the tweaking or because there's a difference. So the common data model was born, and since these controls all rely on precise definition of what these things are, the common data model had to standardize the coding. So the standardized vocabularies were born. So there was no committee who said we need this common data model, we need a common vocabulary. It just became, just popped up out of necessity because otherwise we couldn't have run the experiment. And that's why, this experiment number 1, experiment number 2, fewer outcomes, more drugs, just so you can actually check things out statistically a little bit of why things go wrong. And the whole thing repeated in European databases. And I'm not going to go into this now. And then the findings, these are the old findings, I'm not going to go through them all. This is all status of 2013. We have moved on since then. Okay. But in 2013, there was a symposium just like this in the same hotel, and that was the end of OMOP. So what happened is that the outcomes were delivered over the time, and turns out there is no one winner. Turns out these methods are, pretty good but not perfect, and more work needs to be done. Okay, the pharma industry breathed out because it didn't look like There's no big stick coming which will pluck all these drugs out. It's a lot more harder than that, and so OMOP was no longer, and that happened like exactly 3 years ago, and then after that the project split up, and the Reagan-Udall Foundation for the FDA took over some of the assets, and the principal investigators pretty much came to George and started Odyssey. Okay, so Odyssey is a continuation, a scientific continuation of OMOP, and it's no longer industry-driven. It's a well, you know this. It's a collaborative with a whole community behind it, doing all sorts of things, not just drug safety, method design.
What's the difference between OMOP and Sentinel then?
So Sentinel is that drug surveillance system that the Congress told the FDA to put up, and they did that, and they did a similar thing. They got a bunch of database holders together, who had to conform to some common data model. It's not the OMOP common data model. They decided to invent their own. There's a reason for that, other than just pure politics, which is that this is a sheer US-driven thing, so you don't have to deal with a whole lot of the coding issues and healthcare, setting and issues. So it's just like much more focused. And so the FDA pays the group in Harvard Pilgrim Research Institute to run this mini Sentinel. So essentially Apple and Macintosh and Windows right now, but doing the very similar things, except they're really literally focused on drug safety on behalf of the FDA. The industry cannot go to them and ask them the same questions. None of that. Okay, now we're actually going to get started. Okay, I have to say a few words about the CDM so you know why, what the vocabularies refer to. So there's an evolution. It started with 2, and then we went to 4, and then 5. There is a 1 and 3, but don't ask. And so that's the counting. We are now in 5. At some point, we're going to shut down 4. I already said that yesterday. People don't like to hear that. And at some point we have to go into 6 because there are a whole lot of new features that we need and want, and they're going to support use cases where people are waiting for. Okay. And the way that works is, if you're not familiar, it standardizes the patient perspective of what happened to the patient in healthcare. So it's not about the providers, it's not about administrative pieces of information, not about transactions, this guy ordered this and then it was returned, none of this stuff. This is what happened to the patient. The other day somebody asked in the forum, what if I have a drug for which there was a contraindication and so it wasn't given, okay? How should I code this? What's the type concept, okay? If the patient didn't take the drug, there's no record. Okay? Only what happened to the patient is in here. Okay? It doesn't matter who had thought or might have been happening. So here's what actually happens. The blue stuff is actually what happened to the patient. And this is supporting information. This is about location and providers. Not a lot, but enough so you can actually know who did what to the patients. This is a little bit about cost and paying and things like this for the HEOR folks. This is about the database itself, and this is what we're going to talk today all day long. The standardized vocabulary tables. Okay? Any questions? Actually, just ask questions. Don't wait for me. A little bit of conventions in there. In these tables, the tables actually look all very similar to each other, which is on purpose. And inside the patient tables, you have things which sound very different, so they're confusing. Entity here is drug, condition, measurement, procedure. Okay, So in the procedure table, you have procedure, concept ID, procedure, source concept ID. Okay. The concept ID is defined, this is an important one. This defines what the entity actually is. The source concept ID is what the source said it is. And you're going to learn that we're going to map from here to here, and that's not always perfect. And people have a lot of anxiety, so they can't see the source. The source value is how they call it, because we conceptualize everything. You're going to see that too in a minute. And then there's a procedure type concept ID, and that says where is the information coming from, and what is it from a claims form, or is it from an EHR record, or is it a patient listed from the medical history of the patient. And then there's just the entity ID. Okay, so and that's just a rolling number. So procedure ID is just a row number in the table. You don't need that at all to think about it. Type concept ID is the origin of the information. Source is what the source thought, like some ugly ICD-9 code without a dot. Okay. Source concept ID is how we hold it, and this is the one which actually matters. Procedure concept ID. Or drug concept ID. Good so far? So here's the accommodator model. You actually really only need to know 3 tables, even, not even 4, but maybe some of you need a 4th too. It's the concept table, the concept relationship table, and got the concept ancestor table. That's the entire reference system for the OMOP CDM. Okay. These are really 99% of where you have to go in the real work. In the CDM, there's no verbatim stuff in there at all. Everything is normalized and coded. And does Kartik take the box again? So if you had a heart attack, or hopefully not you, then there is going to be a code or a concept in the table, and so you will not find the word heart attack or myocardial infarction or anything in the patient table. Okay, so in the main table where all the stuff is, which is in that room where the people talking about, okay, where all the clinical information of the patient, no verbatim. You will never find the word myocardial anywhere in here. Okay, this is all coded up. So everything is through the reference table, and the reference table is called concept. And if you want to see what a concept look like, then you run. Yep.
Quick question. So you said there's no verbatim in there, but you just talked about the source value. That is the verbatim, right?
But it's the source value of the code. So it's an IC9 code or a HCPCS code. But it doesn't say myocardial infarction either. So in the actual table, there's no myocardial infarction. The myocardial infarction is here, and we're going to see where it is and how to find it and how to handle it. So concept table is very easy. Let's take a look at it. Select star, all fields, from table concept, where the concept ID is 313217. Okay? You can do that if you want. You can run by, you can listen. You don't have to do it yourself. You can. If you do it, you get the result, and it's going to give you the record in the reference table. It's just a normal reference table, just like thousands of reference tables that you've already worked with, and you get the result.
So that's OMOP ID.
That is the concept ID. Is how we're going to get there. Hold on, we're going to get there. How in the concept you refer to the concept. This is how you find the concept. That's the number, the foreign key. Okay. The idea is, what we did is, we put all different domain entities into one long concept table. It's a very long concept table, like a roll of toilet paper, very long. They're all stacked up here, okay? So there's not one for ICD and one for HCPCS. They're all in here together, no matter where they're coming from. So you have one reference file, concept. They're all in there. Okay? It's now 3 million long, and it keeps growing. And there's like 80 or so different vocabularies in there right now. It's important to say that we, with now an exception, but that was till a couple of months ago, it wasn't an exception yet. Odyssey does not invent vocabularies. We are not making disease vocabularies or anything like this. Okay, no drug vocabularies, no procedure vocabularies, nothing. The only concepts that so all these concepts are stolen from other people. Okay, NDC, GPI, UCOM, you can races from the office of congressional office, OMB, I don't know what it stands for. So they're all other people's work. And actually, so there's a reason for that. Number one is it's absolutely non-trivial work to do. Nobody can just say, okay, I make a list of diseases. Forget that. And second, and these people did put a lot of effort in it. Okay. And second, some of them are actually used in the source data, so we actually have to know them. So this is like a gigantic aggregation job to put them all together into the same table. Okay? And the good thing is there's only one, so you don't have to worry. So whatever you're looking for is in the concept table. If it's not in the concept table, then it's not there. Okay? And the reason is that the raw data, if you try to do it yourself, they all look different. Okay? They even sometimes look different from the same same organization, right? So this is LOINC and this is LOINC hierarchies. No, this is LOINC hierarchies. This is LOINC itself. I mean, they don't even call their own codes the same thing. Here it's called LOINC number, and there it's called code. Okay, so you have this Babylonian situation where everybody pumps out their little files in the different formats, and then there's all sorts of these funny little fields, BLD, BK, and who the hell knows what it is. And all that gets normalized into the one. This is ICD-9. This is what if you download from the CMS, ICD-9. Okay, so nicely without a dot. And so this is what it looks like if you do it yourself, and you don't. Because what Odyssey does is it provides the content of the vocabulary tables to you for free for download. So you have to have your own data, but the vocabularies are all provided. Okay, you don't have to build them. You can, but that's not a good idea. It's a lot of work, and you get the same result. At best, you get the same result that you get if you just go to the download website and download, which is Athena. At the end, we listed all the necessary websites. Okay. So let's take a look at one concept. So again, all these different entities from all these different vocabularies that different people made and that we now use now look the same. And it's not a lot. Okay? Concept ID, that's a foreign key. 313217 is atrial fibrillation. We're using the example of atrial fibrillation and gastrointestinal bleeding, upper gastrointestinal bleeding, and two drugs today, warfarin and clopidogrel or dabigatran, as an example. But you could use any example. Okay, it's a condition. So your heart is not beating. No, the chamber is beating okay. The atrium is having small but ineffective beats. Okay. Condition. The vocabulary where we stole it from is called SNOMED. They call it a clinical finding. So this is concept class ID is something that vocabulary gives us. Okay. It's a standard concept, S. We're going to explain all of these, don't worry about it. There's a concept code, there's a concept ID, there's a concept code. I'm going to explain why that is the case. And there's a validity. No concept ever dies. Okay. The concept table will only grow once there is a record in the concept table. It's not going to go away. 313217 is atrial fibrillation and will stay atrial fibrillation till the end of my life. And we have this tutorial is like started actually at the 2013 symposium where we showed how we do all the matching. And same example. And it was then 313217, and it's going to be in 3 years from now. Okay. So that's a good thing. You can rely that the concepts are always backwards compatible, and you'll find your concept. However, if those guys who make Snowman decide that this is a bad concept, there's no such a thing as atrial fibrillation, it's badly defined, then they'll take it out, and we won't take it out, and it's going to get a valid end date and an invalid reason. And the valid end date means it's no longer valid, and the invalid reason tells you one of two things: either it just died, I don't know what the hell, it's gone. It's still there, but it's D. And if it's a U, upgraded, there's going to be replacement. So instead of this atrial fibrillation, you're going to have to take another concept. Okay? And you're going to see how you find this replacement. But that's how, essentially, all 80 vocabularies look the same. This is it. That's all you have to know. Gigantic simplification.
If one data created in between the very period, then what should be the concept ID?
Hold this out. We're going to get into the concept ID, concept code business right now. Okay? Secret.
If the vocabulary has the same system where they never let concepts die, but they give them their own invalidation code, then
we copy that. Unfortunately, a lot. Yeah, we then do a similar job, right? We do we copy the same thing, right? We do the same thing.
So you would end up invalid in the concept table
as well. Yeah. If they take something out and half of them are done well, half of them are done awfully, and if they're done awfully, we actually, when we refresh, have to see, oh, the code's still there, right? CPT4 codes and HICP codes, they're codes which they used like in the early 2000s and the 90s, they're just gone, okay? So what we do is, as soon as we see some code is gone, we will do this. But they don't. They just say, no more there.
They mark it invalid.
If they mark it invalid, we do the same thing.
Okay.
So yeah, the good ones, it's very easy, you just copy the information over. And the bad ones, you actually have to, this is not good here.
So how often do you refresh the codes into the concept table?
We want to do that regularly, but we haven't quite gotten to a stable. So what happens is the following. When we usually keep in developing it, adding vocabularies, or improving the connections between the concepts, the mappings, we'll see in a minute. And sometimes this is because of the way it's constructed, we run into trouble, and then the release gets delayed. So right now we have the situation. So we at some point we said we're going to have a quarterly release. I don't think we have ever made a quarterly release. They either come in rapid succession because there was a mistake and we have to fix the mistake, or we're working on something and it takes as much time as it takes. So releases, there's a website, I'm going to show you, website where the releases are announced. All you have to do is sign up for this, and it's going to send you an email saying there's a release. And unfortunately, it's going to happen somewhat spontaneously, arbitrarily. So we actually had a release a couple of days ago, but we didn't even put it on the release site yet because we're all here, not working.
One last question. Here you said this was always atrial fibrillation. It was before and it will be, but the valid end date was 16 years ago. Does that mean?
Yeah.
Oh, it's
20. Sorry, I have to fix it. So 31st of December 2099 is whenever in the future. It means it's active. It's a non-nullable field, so it has to be this. 1st of January 70 is we don't know when it started. So it's like at some point it started. But oftentimes we actually know when it started, and we often know when it ended.
So what happens in 2099 when that field is?
I will refer to my successor what to do.
Kind of like Y2K. In 1960, they weren't worried about Y2K.
That's right. It's their
What about
problem.
in 2000?
What do you-
So if there's atrial fibrillation in ICD and atrial fibrillation in Snowman.
Yep,
do
hold,
they have-
hold, hold, hold. Good? Okay.
So, if this was ICD-9 though, not Snowman,
Yep.
and it ended for the rest of the world 16 years ago?
Oh,
but it just didn't for
ending
us?
means, here's what ending means. Ending means not the drug is off the market or anything like this. The concept ends. The semantic meaning of the concept ends. And usually it doesn't end. Atrial fibrillation is not going to end. We know it exists. We know there are a ton of people running around with that condition. So it's going to be there. If usually what happens, they have duplications. Snowman has duplications. It's an international thing. They grab a whole lot of codes from like Australia and England and US, and then they start munching it. And so they have two atrial fibrillations, and they say, oops, we have two, it's just one is British spelling, and then they merge the two, and one of them has to die. And it gets upgraded to the other one. So that happens. Not a lot. So the whole concept world is pretty stable. Each release, there's a little bit on the fringes, there's stuff going on. But the big bulk, 95, 97%, is stable, which is why this works. Which is why if you are on a release date which is somewhat older and you are not exactly waiting for an upgrade that you really badly need, it's okay. It's all right. You know, I mean, there's going to be so few use cases where this is important. So yeah, so don't fret. Many people fret about releases. Don't fret about the releases. Okay. As I said, this whole example which I show you worked this exact same way in 2013, and nothing has changed. A little bit has changed. Okay, so how do these concepts actually are all fit together? Okay. So we have the source codes. This is what they use to define conditions in the data that you have. Okay. ICD-10, ICD-10-CM. We always say ICD-10, but we mean ICD-10-CM. ICD-10-CM is 70,000, ICD-10 is like 20,000. It's a huge difference. This is what the WHO releases. This is what the US CDC and CMS releases. It's not the same thing, but I'm probably not going to educate the entire community not to say ICD-10 anymore. They use this in England. They're trying to go to Snowman. They've been trying to go to Snowman for like 10 years now. Oxford is what they used to use. SEAL is like this thing that they use in open MRS, and so on and so on. And use ICD-9, of course, CM. Nobody else uses, well, Canada still uses ICD-9 too. Nobody else uses ICD-9. And then there are the Snowman concepts. And they have a relationship to each other, and we're going to show you. And then there are classification concepts. Okay, so for conditions, there are concepts coming from a vocabulary called MEDRA. And if you are in the pharma, you are very well familiar with FDA. And if not, you probably have never heard of that thing. And it is a hierarchical condition system, which is very nice, and it's not good. Okay, it's very nice because it's exactly 5 levels of granularity, and that's the problem because you can't actually. The world doesn't function that way, but it's being used, and we support it. Okay, so these are the standard vocabularies, these are the classifications, and these are the source codes. Okay. So now let's try to find concepts in the concept table. Simplest thing, right? I need atrial fibrillation. I need patients with atrial fibrillation, and I want to query the database. So there are a couple of ways how you find this one concept in the 3 million. One is you happen to know the concept ID. And the concept, after this class, you actually will know that 313217 is atrial fibrillation. And it's a piece of knowledge which probably doesn't enrich your life much, but you will have it. If you know the ID, because somebody gave you a list, or whatever other reason, that's it. This is the simplest one. If you type that in, you get the guy. Okay? If you know the code, now we get to the code. What's the code? What's the ID? If you know the code, same thing. This is a SNOMED code. Okay? You get the same guy. So, you either have this ID or you have this ID. Why are there two IDs? This one is what the source calls it. Could have alphanumeric, could be dashes, could be all sorts of funny things in here. This is an ICD-9 code here. This is a Snowman code. This is a HIPX code. Whatever it's there. Okay. This is what they call the entity. And this is what we call the entity. And so we rename everything, which is a nuisance, isn't it? So if you have a SNOMED browser and you type in atrial fibrillation, it will not give you 313217. It will give you this guy, which is a SNOMED code. Okay? There are lots of these on the web. The problem is that the different, remember we have 80 vocabularies, they don't know what the other guys, and they don't care what the other guys do. So the namespace of codes of the other vocabularies isn't, it's in conflict with each other. Okay? So you don't have a unique identifier if you just use the original ICD-9 codes, original SNOMED codes. For example, if you say select star from concept where concept code is 1001 and you don't specify the vocabulary, you get concepts from any of the vocabularies where the code happened to be 101. And of course, this is a whole lot of different things, right? It's the same code, and it's a drug, it's an ingredient, an indication, a drug class, an ingredient, and the revenue code. Okay. So we need to, unfortunately, or fortunately, the Pope, was Mario Bergoglio, and now he's Francis. Everybody gets renamed, okay, and they get an ID, and that is unique, okay.
Do you have a ceremony for new codes that white puff?
That's right, white puff. Yeah, we should do that. We should actually. I like that. We're going to do that. In the documentation, we're going to do that. Put a little white puff there. So that's why everything is in this OMOP concept IDs. But you always can go back and get what they originally had, right? Because we have it in this is what they call it. So you always come back and find what they actually called it originally, why it's now what they originally called it. Okay. But in the data, it's going to be referred to by the ID. So everything which is ID is OMOP. Everything which is code is not OMOP. Very simple rule. Okay, that's how it works. Next, if you know the name, and that's probably the most common, I need atrial fibrillation. Well, you say select star from concept where concept name is atrial fibrillation. And if you do this, then you get not one, but 5. And of course, one of them is the one that's our friend, though. This one, the first one, 313217. And these are the other vocabularies. They also have atrial fibrillations. Somebody asked that question a second ago. Okay. So now you have lots of atrial fibrillations. Every concept has, I forgot to say that, has a domain. No, this is also something that we add. For every concept that we have, because it's no longer, so if you have an ICD-9 reference list, they're all diagnostic codes. It's actually not true. There are all sorts of V codes and other ugly things because it added all sorts of junk in there. And actually, most vocabularies have a whole mixture. But in the minds of people, ICD-9 are conditions, HIPX are procedures. Okay, and so if you put them all together in one big table, then that information is gone, and not everybody will know. If you ask an Englishman, or anybody from overseas what HIPX is, they say, what? And they've never heard of it, and they probably never will, and they don't care. For them, you need to say, oh, that was a procedure, by the way. Okay. So every concept has a domain ID that we assign. It's very good, but it's not perfect. Sometimes there's a mistake. Okay. So these are conditions. So atrial fibrillation is a condition, which means you will find this thing in the condition table only. You'll never find a condition concept in a procedure table, which is important. HIPX has concepts which are not procedures. They're observations, they're conditions. They will not be in the procedure table. So we're going to put HICPICS code, even though it has a word procedure in it, into the condition table. Okay? Because they are conditions, or drugs actually. We generally have a lot of conversation about that. HICPICS codes, for example, for a drug that's administered in the hospital. It's a drug event. So that particular concept is going to have drug, and so it's going to live in the drug exposure table. Okay? So every concept knows what it is. Some concepts in the source, some concepts that aren't particularly well defined, like complication after a hysterectomy, okay, are two things: the hysterectomy and complication, which means they're condition and the procedure. So they're just badly munched together, pre-coordinated together. Makes sense for the billing world, doesn't make sense for us. The ones which are important, which are standard concepts, and I'll tell you what standard concepts are in a moment, don't do that, they are clean. So the concepts which go into the concept table, into the patient tables, OMOP, CDM to patient tables, clinical tables, all are clean. They're only one thing. Okay. So what are these guys here? Condition, 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 measurement value. This is actually, atrial fibrillation is a LOINC answer in a survey. So LOINC has these surveys where they have all the standardized answers. So this answer happened to be an atrial fibrillation, but it's not a condition, it's an answer to a question. Okay?
I have a question.
Yep.
Can you change a domain without changing the concept between a release?
Yeah.
Reclassify.
Yeah. So if we made a mistake and somebody says, wait, this is a condition, you look at it as a condition, and we're saying, yeah, it's a condition, then from one release to another release, a condition. When you rerun your ETL, suddenly all records with this guy will have to show up in the condition table and no longer in the, in this case, observation table. Okay? That's what happens.
I have a question on the moment.
Yeah.
It seems like they introduced this idea of when you just refer when the same concept can belong to more than one domain. So in that case, the domain is still single value, but
It has a slash.
slash.
Has a slash.
Signature.
You don't have to worry about it, and I explain to you why you don't worry.
I
Don't
don't worry about it.
worry about it.
It's really beneficial.
Don't worry about it. But yes, but complication during hysterectomy is going to be condition/procedure, and it's going to be resolved in such a way that it's clean. You'll see.
Right,
Mhm.
but isn't it clear that should one need it more relational? Limit the domain to the
Yeah, it'll happen. Hold the thought. It'll happen.
Okay. So in regards to what Don was mentioning about if one code gets a different domain after a certain time period, is that indicated as two records in the concept table?
Just changes.
It just changes?
Yeah.
Okay.
So the only thing, so I should have said that more precisely. The only thing which never changes is this guy. They can change the name, but they should change the semantic content. So they call it, what's the synonym for atrial fibrillation? I know one in German. So it doesn't have one. But if there were, so for oftentimes, for example, SNOMED goes from British to American spelling, and then you suddenly, the tumor is no longer spelled with an O-R, but with an O-U-R, those kind of things. So this can change, this can change, this cannot change, this can change, this can change. Why is this twice here? Oh, and this cannot change. Because this is theirs, this is theirs. All the other information can change, but they're only tweaks. It's not, we can't make atrial fibrillation turn it into a hysterectomy. That's not going to happen. There could be slight changes of these attributes. Okay. So yeah, but it's very small. It's rare. It's not like suddenly the whole garbage can is emptied and you have like all SNOMED now are drugs, and so this is not going to happen.
Basically, what will happen, and the new records will be available with the same concept ID that existed before.
Yes.
The original one will get the effective family.
No. If these things change and somebody changed the spelling, the concept keeps going. And the fact that they had another spelling, from a semantic perspective, it doesn't matter. It's just a different. There's actually a table called concept synonym in parallel. I'm not going to go into that today, which has all these little other versions of how you call things. So the so this 313217 belongs to the semantic meaning of atrial fibrillation and will always do. We can demote it from standard to source, to classification, whatever we want to do. You know, we can change this concept classically, or the guys who gave us the Snowman code do, you know. So then it just gets overwritten, and you get new information into the same concept. But the semantic meaning is the same.
So, but, sorry.
Shannon.
But if you're trying to do a study
Yeah.
and you're trying to recreate results and you're just changing the domain ID, or one time this was indicated as a condition and now it's an observation,
Yeah.
you're going to get values that are different and you can't really recreate your results.
Yes.
Okay.
The data change, and this thing changes. Again, this is not typical. This happens, so where the changes happen in the fringes, people are desperately waiting for this to be fixed, okay, and not like, oh my god, he changed it. What the hell, okay, so, and it's a small amount of changes. So this is not a typical situation that these things change. Usually they're very stable, but by definition they don't have to be the same.
But every time there is a change, the name of the timestamp would be different. So
No.
So you
No.
don't know.
If the semantic, the timestamp and the concept ID belongs to the semantic idea of what this thing is. And if this doesn't change, it's still active, keeps going. I mean, you know, if they call it, you know, if they turn it into a Latin word, fibrillatio atriale or something like this, you would not change. I mean, it's still the same, right? It's still condition. Your study would be the same. Don't worry about it. Okay? So that's why these things are semantic concepts. They are not texts, okay, or anything like that. They're semantic concepts. So the fact that the text changes here, if the semantic concept doesn't change, it's still the same thing. So I just changed my name, went to the RMV, and now John. Okay. Yeah.
So the domain ID is not directly associated with the vocabulary ID?
No.
Okay.
So
Just wanted-
there's a big
Overlap.
you know, correlation,
Sure.
but it's not.
I didn't think so. Okay.
If anything changes, then the vocabulary release ID will change.
Yeah.
And
Nothing changes under the carpet.
right, but when we run, I mean, in all the various ways that we run results, do we usually save the vocabulary release ID with the?
That's a good question. What we do and whether we should do it. The problem is we don't keep all the previous versions.
So if you want to rerun something with the previous release, that's not really an option.
We don't have those. I mean, it'd be huge. I mean, I don't know. We could. Yeah, we could. Again, it's a more theoretical than practical problem.
Okay.
Usually the changes are additions or fixes, not just arbitrarily somebody says atrial fibrillation is a drug. That's not usually what happens. Yeah. Same question. So yeah, so this for people who are very, you know, who think very structurally in this world, for them it's painful. In practice, it actually isn't a big problem. Mm-hmm.
I have a problem with complication after hysterectomy being a condition and a procedure.
Yep.
So bleeding after taking warfarin is not a drug.
No.
So why would complication after hysterectomy be a procedure?
Because bleeding after warfarin is a drug/procedure, drug/condition.
It's not a drug.
Yeah, if you took a drug, then you have the information that you took warfarin.
Oh, but
What happened to the patient? What happened to the patient?
Warfarin is a drug, and it's going to be.
And I happen to know that the patient got warfarin. Big warfarin.
Yes, but it's recorded somewhere else as a drug.
That's right. It's going to be recorded as a drug.
Bleeding is the bleeding, and it's a condition.
Correct. So in the condition table, you got the bleeding. In the drug table, you get the warfarin.
So we're saying it's
That mixture is going to be split up. That mixed model is going to be cut into two, and you get two records, one in one and one in the other.
how does the categorization work? Who goes through and categorizes all these codes and says, this is a condition?
Okay, in most cases, if I have a drug, if I have Rx norm, okay, it's a drug. I have to worry about it. And then there are those which are on the other extreme, which is like HICPIX and CPT4. And we build like a heuristic of using the hierarchy in there and a few other tricks to do a good guess of what this thing is. So yes, they can be mistakes, and then we have to fix it. But for most vocabularies, they're all just one domain anyway. Okay, so ICD-9 is dirty, HICPIX is dirty, CPT4 is dirty, ICD-10 is actually much cleaner than ICD-9. Read is all over the place. So yeah, some of them are dirty and some of them are clean. Yeah, there's a heuristic, and we can show you where that is.
Perfect, yeah.
Yep. And unfortunately, the documentation lags, which it should be in the documentation exactly. Okay, let's try pressing on. It's very good to get all these questions, which means you actually really, after figuring this out, we still have to get through here. Now, let's say I have this ICD-9 CM code, or actually ICD-9 code for this matter, and I know the code. Okay, it's atrial fibrillation. I know. That's very often. People know these codes by heart. It's bizarre. So I type it in. So let's start from concept. The concept code is this guy. And I get atrial fibrillation, condition, ICD-9, that's true. Yeah, it's a 5-digit billing code. We are good, right? Only problem is, this guy is not 313217. Okay? So there are two, and it's like I showed you a minute ago, right? There are two, there's many concepts which have an overlapping meaning or even identical meaning. Like in this case, these four have an identical meaning. Right? How do I know which one? How do they differ from each other? Right? Which one's the one that I want? Right? Well, we know we want this one, but why do we want this one? Right? Has an S. Only one of them is an S, which means it's a standard concept. Okay? So in contrast to UMLS, in contrast to UMLS, we don't do it this way. We say if there are four guys which are equal, one of them is more equal. And it's this one, in this case. Could be the other one. That could actually change. We're not going to change it arbitrarily just to make your life hard. But it could, it's not unimaginable that this changes.
Sorry, I missed what makes them equal. Is it the concept name?
Well, no, you know that atrial fibrillation is atrial fibrillation.
Right, but I mean...
Not technically, yes.
What is going to have an S?
What?
Only one of what?
Of atrial fibrillation.
Okay, so only one of the things that have that concept name is going to have an S.
No, only one of concepts which have the same semantic meaning. They could be, they could say something which is synonymous. Have an S. We'll get there.
Okay,
We'll get how we get from this guy to this guy, right? And which of them are actually equivalent.
But it's a little confusing because you have two S's up there, so you have to add another criteria.
Because this one is not a condition, right. So there are two S's and a C. Okay? So S is standard. That's the guy. That's the one who shows up in the CDM table. If you want to run a study with atrial fibrillation, you have to use the S. If you use the ICD-9 concept, this one here, where there's no S, which is a null, you will not find a single patient. No one. Okay, so on your little thing here, we're going to do it at some point. No condition occurrence table will not have this concept ID in the table. Only we're going to have this concept ID in the table. Okay? And C is a classification. Classification can't be in the table either. You cannot find a record with a measure concept in the table with the clinical data. It's a classification. So we have standard, null, and classification. And if you remember this little picture here that we had, page up, page up, page up, page up, page up, page up, page up.
They won't be in the concept table?
They're all in the concept table.
What table won't it be in?
Oh, concept table.
Condition occurrence table.
The condition.
No. The reference table concept has them all, but in the condition occurrence table,
Oh, you should.
there's a field called condition concept ID, which tells me the patient had atrial fibrillation. You'll only find the S guys, not the C guys, and not those guys.
And
But
this-
they're all connected, and I'll show you the connection.
And this is because you decided that conditions would be normalized in reference to snowman.
So the true answer is the condition is normalized to one of equivalent concepts. We just make a decision for the various domains where they typically come from, which of them we like more than the other guys. And since norm is very clean, Rx norm is very clean, we use the Rx norm who gets always the one who is the S. Doesn't have to be that way. We could decide other way.
Not all conditions are normalized to snowman.
All conditions are normalized to snowman. All drugs are
There's no
normalized to snowman.
S's. There's no S's in the condition domain that
There could
are
be.
not associated with snowman.
They could be, but right now it's not the case. But they could be. So in procedure, for example, we don't have actually done the work of harmonizing all the procedures together, that we can very well say one of the two procedures is an S and the other one is not. That's actually a job we want to start doing, to do that. Nobody has done that yet. But in condition world, it's usually SNOMED. In the drug world, it's Rx norm extension. Okay.
Quick question.
Mm-hmm.
What if your source data has a different, provides the other concept?
Yep, we'll get there.
Okay.
So this is what's in the source data. This is what is in the OMOP data.
Right.
And these are classifications for your convenience. And we're going to learn how you get from here to here and how you get from here to here.
You expected to roll it up?
It all there.
Okay.
It's all there.
Could you conceivably, if someone wanted to, and because there's an OMOP concept ID for ICD-9s, if someone decided that it was cleaner to use ICD-9 in their condition occurrence, could they do that and then make all the ICD-9 standard concepts?
Could happen.
Okay.
Nobody in their right mind is going to just do those kind of things just to make it hard on you. And, you're barely, keeping up. So, very unlikely for this to happen, but logically it can.
There's two things though with that. The source concept ID, the condition source concept ID will be ICD-9, the actual ICD-9 concept ID, if
Yep.
that's what it is. So you don't have to break it, because if you break it, then you can't do anything with community. When you use Atlas, when you use distributed queries and when you share and other things like that, shared queries or use code that's on the site, you can't because
Shared queries have to use the standard. In fact, all queries should use the standard. Don't do this thing that I have ICD-9 codes. It doesn't work in England, it doesn't work in France, it doesn't work in Germany, it doesn't work in Korea, it doesn't work in Japan. So don't do it. It's creating frustration and anxiety with people. But I don't know ICD-9. I only know ICD-9. That changed a lot in the last year because I had to go ICD-10 and suddenly the world didn't stop. And suddenly I can use another code just as well. So that was much worse a couple of years ago, where everybody says, much better now. But there's still anxiety in the world that somebody is going to do a translation. All right, so let's pressing on. So we were here. So how do we get from this guy to this guy, right? How do we get from this guy to the one that we want? There is a table which does it. Okay, the table is called concept relationship, where concept ID 1 is this one that is atrial fibrillation, but not the one that we want. Okay, and what does it do? It has several fields. Well, its animation didn't work. I don't know what's going on. The concept ID 1, concept ID 2, how they're related. And there's one relationship which we are now paying attention to only, which is called MAPS2. And that's it. So what's MAPS2? That's probably the most important relationship for people. I hate this thing. So here's the thing, right? The European Union has 24 members, soon 23. So it has 24 official languages. These are the language. And if you look on the website, okay, they're very proud. They say, with a permanent staff of 1,750 linguists and 600 support staff, the Commission has one of the largest translation services in the world, bolstered by a further 600 full-time and 3,000 freelance interpreters. Wonderful, okay? So what happens if they are in the commissioners in session? They sit there with a headset. In the back are the simultaneous translators. The next guy goes to the podium and talks. The translators all go out. The next round goes in, and they do a many-to-many translation all the time. When the session is over, they go to the committees or they go to the pub. Everybody speaks English. Okay, everybody. And so this is the situation, right? We have 24 ways to say cheers, okay, when the meaning actually is only cheers, okay? So in OMOP, we do not find that particularly a source of pride to maintain such a thing, and I think the community shouldn't maintain that either. We speak English, okay? We speak OMOP standard concepts. And so there is a mapping, and it's provided for free, so you don't have to know all the IC9 codes, how they map to SNOMED, all the read codes, how they map to SNOMED, all the Oxmed codes, how they map to SNOMED. You can get the vocabulary that you download to do the job for you, okay? So this is just a service that you get for free, just like a bilingual dictionary, okay? So you have the source concept, and it's not a standard, and you say, Jesus, okay? Translate that thing for me. It's like skull, and so you put it into the translation table. And if you don't want to see all the other relationships, you say and relationship ID equal to maps 2, and you get only the maps, the translations. And if you do that, this guy translates to our friend. Okay. Okay.
There's something I'm not getting here, I'm sorry, but I would have thought that knowing the concept ID would just pick the one that corresponds to the S.
Yeah, but if you, right, but if you happen to know an ICD-9 code, which people happen to know, right, they look up the ICD-9 code, right, so they go to the concept table, give me my ICD-9 code, they get this guy, turns out it's not a standard, it's Swedish, they go to the translation table and get the English.
But why can't you
Swedish,
just do a
English.
join on the concept table and get the one that has the S?
No. If you go by name, you will do that, and you will get the one that has an S. If you happen to know an ICD-9 code, you don't know the SNOMED code, you don't know the name. You just have an ICD-9 code. 250 is diabetes, right? 411 is myocardial infarction, so I happen to know these two. Okay. So just say, what's myocardial infarction? It's 411 and ICD-9. I put this guy in. Oh, Jesus. And
While you're plugging in, can I give a little bit of a pitch?
do that.
One of the very best things in the world that the VA has found with this is because we just went from ICD-9 to now ICD-10. And for the last year, everybody's been messing up the research because they forget that you have to do ICD-10 after October 1st. So if you do this and you put in the ICD-9 codes and then you say, what does it map to? It maps to these SNOMED codes. Well, guess what? What else is also mapped to the SNOMED codes is the ICD-10 code.
That's right.
So by going to the standard concept code, you get anything that's mapped to it. And so you get the ICD-9 stuff, you get the 10 stuff.
Beautiful segue. You're going to do exactly that in an exercise right now.
So in
Is it in now?
Yeah, it is.
Now it is.
You're fine?
I'm fine.
in the relationship table for the MAPS 2 records, between concept 1 and concept 2 is a
Yeah.
many-to-one relationship.
It's a what relationship?
Many-to-one, so you can have many
Yeah,
concepts
exactly.
the same,
That's exactly what was
but
just
you
said.
can never have one concept mapped to more than one.
You can if they have to split.
Oh, so you could end up with 2 condition records based on 1 condition.
That's correct. If they
Okay.
pre-coordinate and they say viral hepatitis and hepatocoma, which is ICD-9 070, these are 2 things. I mean, they're related to each other, but one is the disease of the brain, the other one is the disease of the liver, okay? And we split them up.
Okay. Oh,
It's not perfect, but it's definitely the guys get split up which have 2 different domains. They have to get split up. So if I have, bleeding after hysterectomy, then I get 2 guys here. One maps to the bleeding, the other one maps to the hysterectomy.
And is
Which is
there-
actually like a bilingual dictionary too. If you have a term which is a homonym, which has several meanings, you
Right,
get
right,
several of
yeah.
them listed.
So, in the condition occurrence table, you'll get the source ID and stuff, but when you get the source record number so that you can know that two condition occurrences actually
That's
mean
lost.
something?
Lost.
It's lost.
Lost. It doesn't matter. Because the way the clinical data work is, the way that these observational data works like a movie, right? So the patient lives, and then things happen on one day, happen on the next day, happen a week later. And the fact that they are related, if we happen to have a concept which is pre-coordinated, we know that the bleeding is due to the hysterectomy. But usually that's not given anyway. These connections are usually not given. They're very rarely known. So all you know is hysterectomy and bleeding at the same day.
But doesn't the person look sicker if they've got 5 diagnoses instead of 1 because the one happens to map to 5?
But they actually have 5 different things going on. If you have viral hepatitis with a coma, hepatocoma, if you have viral hepatitis, you can walk around and, go shopping.
Well,
Okay?
plus there's
If you have
also-
hepatocoma, you can't.
There's the source concept code, the source concept ID, which will
Still have it.
have your original code in
Yeah.
there.
If you really want to dig this up, which I'm saying, don't do that.
Yeah.
But if you have to, then yes, we can do that.
Okay.
So that's the reason why we still preserve the source stuff. So people don't get completely freaked out if they have to
Right, so actually the source code does allow you to go backwards. I mean, you don't know that they didn't get the source thing twice, but probably they did.
But you could make a query saying to say the source code in this table, and then you get the connection. You can do that very ugly, not interoperable in different CDNs, works only in yours. Standardized tools, like what yesterday was shown, will not do that because they don't know, they don't know ICD-9. They don't want to know ICD-9, right? If something happens, this is how the CDM, the observational data work, right? There's an unspoken set of axioms, right? If something happened, you have a record. If nothing happened, you don't have a record. That's how it works.
Why this might matter to me is if I'm building a tool that allows somebody to roll up a level in classification, it might be easier for me to roll up in the source vocabulary than to roll up from the 5 different SNOMED codes.
No, garlic in the cross and holy water, don't do that. Okay? Don't do that. Not compatible. Okay? The fact that they had a bleeding and the fact that they had a hysterectomy the same day in an English database is going to be with 2 codes anyway. Okay? And so what your tool should do should find, if you're looking for outcomes of hysterectomy, then you're going to say, give me all the patients who had hysterectomy in the procedure table and had bleeding the same day or a week after, whatever you decide is still a week after in the condition table. Those are the patients I want. Because if they had a hysterectomy and they bleed, you could, if you want to get really fancy, you can exclude all other reasons why they could bleed and then you have those people. But that's how you should do it. The observational data have very rarely logical connections between the entities. Usually it's just a movie, things happen. So, for example, for drugs, right? We'll very rarely, very few databases, you get the indication for a drug. The doctor just prescribes because he says, oh yeah, I give you a sleeping pill too, you're going to feel better. right? And there isn't even an indication, right? It's just doctor sees the guy who's like all anxious, diazepam, bang, right? So we usually don't get those connections. In absolutely most cases, we don't get these connections anyway.
Which connections?
Between two entities in the data. Like this is because of that, or this is.
Right, but that's not what I meant. So say the data that comes in is at the level of the ingredient, and so that maps to a bunch of RX norm codes that all have that ingredient in them. So that means the drug table has a bunch of things in it for that person on that day, rather than just the one thing.
We get to the drugs in a moment. Works slightly different. It works the same. It's the same logic, and you'll see how it works, because in RX norm is good enough to actually provide a concept for whatever amount of detail you have. So if you happen to know, because NDC codes gives it to you, or whatever your code is, the ingredients of a drug, and the strength, and the form, and the brand name, and the manufacturer, all that.
But you're not going to end up with many.
You get one code which has it all together.
So you won't go from one to many in drugs.
They are mapping tables where I can't figure out the drug, and then I have to do it. It's rare.
Okay.
So one to many is a rare occasion, freaks people out, but it's actually a rare occasion.
Because it looks like you had 16 pills instead of 30 pills, right?
But you actually had 16 individual ingredients, and you could have gotten 16 pills.
Oh, I see.
And it would have had exactly the same pharmacological effect on the patient. Again, it's always about what the patient experienced, not what some institution thinks or does. Or that's
So it's not going to be because you have two names of the same thing?
No.
Okay.
So I think it took me 30 minutes to understand, but I think what confuses some of us is that you, on purpose, underwriting or deconstructing every bit of pre-coordination that exists in these vocabularies so as to assign the right piece of information where it belongs in your model, so that when queried your way, you will be able to find it regardless of how it was coded in the first place.
Exactly.
It takes a little bit of thinking for
That's right.
us who have been trained the
other way.
opposite way in the first place.
And the reason is you could live, so like Sentinel doesn't do that, because they don't do this whole vocabulary business. If you are sitting in a drug company in England, AstraZeneca or GSK, you don't know this stuff, okay? And why this is pre-coordinated, so you just want the people who bled, okay? So yeah, that's exactly the idea.
Question, so who validates the mappings? Who says this ICD-9 code is equivalent to this Snowman code?
journey.
The community does it. If you find a mistake, toss it in the forum and we fix it.
I see.
No, there are people who, so usually you do two people, and then if it's a manual job and not a heuristic job, then there are two people, and then you compare. If they agree, then it's fine. If they don't agree,
You didn't start from UMLS, or?
Of course, we steal from the UMLS as much as we can.
Okay.
But there's a lot of stuff which is not in the UMLS. The UMLS only gives you equivalence. If there is no equivalent, you don't have it.
Okay.
But we can't do that. We have to map. So we're going to map so-called upwards. So a slightly less granular concept, so that if you do the query, you still find the stuff. Okay. You may not find exactly that fine-grained, what's this ICD-10 code, trauma because of accident with a spacecraft. Okay. So you're not going to find that thing in Snowman, accident with a spacecraft. And you may not worry about it so much. But there will be codes.
Spiking, right?
Huh?
Those have been spiking.
Those have been spiking. Well, there will be, Independence Day, we have all that on Sunday. Yeah.
So, since the mappings is kind of a team effort, when things are changed, does that just get added as another record to the concept relationship table with a valid ID? And so, or the valid date. So,
And the old one gets deprecated still there.
and it gets deprecated. So, I have a question about just the usage of these valid dates in the vocabularies, because it seems, at least on the ETL side, to not be understood correctly.
Stop
so,
nodding, Don.
Well,
Yeah.
fellow
Yes.
ETLer here. So, so you have a valid start and date range for the concept relationship table. So when you have data that's dated, are you looking at that it's valid for the data dated in that valid date range, or it's at the time of the ETL?
At the time of the ETL.
So, okay,
So
but then,
old concepts will have a new translation. So the Swedes, instead of skull, said something like school in the 1900s, and we're going to have today a translation from school to cheers. So the old guys have a valid, fresh translation of today.
so in your concept table then, when you were mentioning that, you know, if, I think, like, I live in dirty vocabulary, so ICD-9 code, 6 fix codes, they get deprecated, Higgs fix codes get deprecated, right? Because they come in and out every quarter, right? Or for certain drugs. So if you deprecate them on a certain date, and then you're ETLing earlier, so something was last year, deprecated this year, you're ETLing the data, the drug is dated last year because it was a valid code last year, but you're ETLing data, does that new code get concept ID equals 0? Because it was deprecated at the time of ETLing.
No. The fact that you have old data and deprecated codes, therefore, in the data, doesn't affect the translation table.
So the valid start and end date in the concept table is based on the date of the data, but the valid start and end date on the concept relationship table is based on the date of the ETL.
Yeah. That's in the short form.
Okay.
That's in the short form. So you just blindly rely, unless you want to check it and then come with the mistakes and tell us, which of course we very much like. You take today's translation table and just whatever comes in, you translate with today's dictionary.
Okay.
And the old stuff is going to be translated to good new ones. So if this guy dies, and we have a new one in the standard, okay, so this 3132.17 is dead, they replaced it with something else, all the mappings are going to automatically be redirected, okay? So you will not map to a crappy old standard concept.
So then to just kind of make sure, and maybe anybody else is nervous about it, but since it's a separate record, and you are doing a study, and you're trying to replicate results, and maybe your source code got sent to another concept ID, you could go back and look at the relationship table and say, oh, well, it's because I ETL'd this data in 2014, so I should really use that mapping instead. Okay, got it.
So I've noticed in a lot of the ETL that's been posted online, people are just checking for the invalid reason or that code to see whether it's null or not, as opposed to looking at the dates.
The invalid reason, the moment it's no longer 31st of December 2099, it changes to a D or a U. So you can do either one. If you don't care whether it's a D or a U, you just do the invalid reason, which is quicker than do date comparisons. So I always use invalid reason, just because it's more convenient, instead of doing this, date comparison. But it's equivalent information.
Where now it exists now, right?
Huh?
So
No. Yeah, some of the null thing, people complain about the null thing. It's too late. We can't change it anymore. It should be instead of null, it should be something, n or something. But because comparison to null, many databases don't like that. It's slow. But so yeah, if you want to do it fast, then you do a little internal translation, then you do the comparison with it, whatever. Don usually calls it X, and then it's compares to X. As far as I remember.
So you mentioned you reuse UMLS mappings. Have you ever modified some of those mappings?
Yeah. So the mappings we give are not the one-to-one UMLS mappings. They are usually, so we use several sources if we can. So for example, ICD-10 to SNOMED, we use the mapping that WinCar does from NLM, and then the NHS in Great Britain does one, and then UMLS does one. And we do a big pot and stir this, and then we flip it upside down because all of them do a SNOMED to ICD-10 mapping. Why? Because they need ICD-10 for billing, and that's what's important to them. They don't care about the stupid semantics. They need ICD-10 to get money. So if they have a system which understands SNOMED, they want to have that translated into ICD-10. We don't care about the money, we care about the meaning, so we have to convert the mapping. And you can't always do this because they are not always go both ways. So we have to check them out anyway. Many times you can flip it. Atrial fibrillation you can flip and it's fine. But it's those nasty ones which you definitely can't flip.
I'm nice.
You are nice. Okay, why don't you do it? So whoever can, so how do we do this? We do a little break, okay? Do the exercise if you can. If not, just have coffee or work with somebody who has a VM. The exercise is find the standard concept for these guys. Okay? So you have an ICD-9 code, you have an ICD-10 code, you have a read code, and after the break we're going to find out who got the right result.